Joining us in the Answer Studio, Peter Stephan from the Tax Resolution Institute. Great to have you, Peter.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks. Great to be here.
First and foremost, how did you get into the business of resolving tax issues for taxpayers?
That's an interesting question. Early on in my career, I was hired by a company who was in the high-tech industry, and they were making a fortune. Well, they were making so much money that they asked me to move my CPA practice into their facility and take care of their inside as well as my practice. They paid me a lot of money to do it, and I thought it was just the best deal since sliced bread. Well, what happened was, as it does in the tech industry, the margins started deteriorating. The competitors started infringing on the patents, and the payroll tax checks that I was signing were going into the drawer. Little did I know that I was personally liable for those payroll taxes as well as the owners.
Right.
So, fortunately, all's well that ends well. We ended up paying it off at $20,000 a month.
Oh, wow.
This is back in the 80s, and I got out from under that possibility. But at that time, I didn't even know what I didn't know, and that was the problem. So that led me to the tax resolution business and the ins and outs of both income and payroll taxes.
Payroll taxes, that's a huge issue. We'll get to that in a moment. People who have come to the taxresolutioninstitute.com, they're coming to the website maybe because in all likelihood they have been contacted, whether it's by the Franchise Tax Board in California, they've been contacted by the IRS. One of the real emotions that people, that I think that I know, one of the real emotions that strike people first when they want to resolve a tax issue is there's fear. There is a lot of fear for the taxpayer who is contacted. They owe back taxes. They haven't filed a return. I think that, and you're the expert, Peter, the greatest enemy of that fear is inaction. People get contacted. They don't take action. They're almost paralyzed by the fear of not knowing what to do when they have an unresolved tax issue.
That's true, Brian. And the worst thing you could possibly do in a situation where you have unfiled returns or you owe past taxes is ignore the notices from the IRS or think that it's going to go away because they haven't contacted you or because you've moved. That happens quite frequently because the IRS is not going anywhere and they are not going to.
It turns out.
That's correct.
They're here to stay. Okay.
They're not going to lose your bill.
Right.
In all the years I've been doing this, they've never lost the bill of a taxpayer. Right. They, at times, have delayed in calling, have delayed in sending notices, have sent notices to the wrong place. Those issues are all problematic. But the fact of the matter is that if you ignore them, they're not going away.
And I think that when and the wake-up call to a lot of taxpayers is that garnishment notice. When you get the notice at 25%, it can be up to 25% of your paycheck is going away. It can be that high, that number, right?
It could actually be more than that, and you have to add the state issues to that as well.
Who's friendlier to deal with, the IRS or the California Franchise Tax Board, or is neither friendlier to deal with?
Well, I hate to put it this way, but the IRS is a walk in the park compared to the Franchise Tax Board,
really?
The State Board of Equalization, or the Employment Development Department in California, and the related state agencies in the other states that we work in, and we do work in them all.
And the services that the Tax Resolution Institute, and that's the website you want to go to, taxresolutioninstitute.com.
You can also get there, if you can't remember that or it's too long or you can't type, by typing in UncleSam1040.com.
Oh, that's great. UncleSam1040.com.
Correct, Brian.
And one of the first, obviously, the first step you'll take with someone who comes in is to really understand fully where they are at, to understand their delinquency, and kind of get a handle of where the taxpayer is at. And oftentimes people don't really know the extent to the peril that they're in, right? People maybe don't understand where they're at, and you can find out where they're at on their behalf. And that's one of the great kind of reliefs is that when they come to you at the Tax Resolution Institute, you breathe a sigh of relief. They kind of hand it off to you. And what's kind of the first action that you take on behalf of a new client?
Well, typically the client gets a notice or gets a garnishment on their pay or a levy on their bank account, and then they're forced to take action. The first thing that we need to determine is what they really owe. Because typically the taxpayer gets a notice, they owe $10,000, $50,000, $100,000, or a lot more. We've dealt with cases up to $180 million.
Wow.
And it is not just the notice you received in the mail. You may receive a notice for 1 year. You may owe for 5 years. And so the first thing we do after obtaining a power of attorney, which allows us to speak with the IRS regarding tax matters only, is to determine what returns are unfiled, what years there are taxes owed for, and why those taxes are owed. Usually, by filing the returns, we can eliminate the taxes. Sometimes the returns were filed incorrectly. There's a lot of that going on nowadays because we have what we call COD income. People's homes have been foreclosed.
Right.
So they get the COD income, a 1099 in the mail, and they owe the tax on the relief of debt. Well, that may not necessarily be true. There are certain provisions of the tax code that allow you to exclude the income tax on those kinds of things. So many, many times, clients have gone to taxpayers have gone to preparers who don't know how to prepare those returns properly,
right.
Or have filed the returns themselves and reported this income where all the tax, this happens quite often in the business, that they thought they owed goes away by properly amending the returns. So not only do we resolve tax collection issues, you know you owe it, you can't pay it.
How do you go about working that out?
And we work it and we work that out.
Right.
Now, let's talk for a minute about how we work out those kinds of things when we know that you owe the tax.
It's easier to know, right? Is it easier dealing with a client? Where you have that information going up, you going in, you know what's owed. But oftentimes, people should not be thrown by that notice because that notice, while it is a wake-up call, and we've talked about that, that number almost all of the time is higher than reality, right? And that's you come to the Tax Resolution Institute and you find out what that real number is. And that relieves a lot of the fear and the stress right away. It's getting a handle on actually what the issue is.
That's correct. By way of example, let's say that 2 or 3 years ago, you owned and sold Apple stock that you paid $100 a share for. And or $500 a share, which is the price that it's at today.
Right.
And you sold it for $400 a share. Well, you've got a loss on the stock. So maybe that was your only income for the year. Maybe you didn't have a job. Maybe your business closed down. Maybe you're retired or independently wealthy. It doesn't matter. The IRS gets a report that you sold 100 shares of Apple stock at $400 a share or $40,000. Well, if you don't file your return, the IRS is going to tax you on the entire $40,000, as if you paid nothing for the stock, when in fact you lost $10,000 on that trade of Apple stock. We have clients who've traded 100, 200, 500 day traders that have traded millions of dollars in stock and lost money and not filed returns, get bills from the IRS for $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000.
Wow! One of the great things about the Tax Resolution Institute, and by the way, I have worked with you folks, and one thing I want to stress to folks who are seeing us and hearing us for the first time is that from my own personal experience, there is a lot of fear, there is a lot of stress when you go in, and one of the great services, Peter, that you and your folks at the Tax Resolution Institute provide is you really do put the client at ease. I can speak from personal experience because I contacted you with a tremendous amount of fear. I contacted you from a place of ignorance. I really didn't know what my situation was. And you folks and your team, Matt and all of the folks there, you did put me at ease. And I think that's really one of the most important things for folks to understand. If they haven't filed returns, if they have unfiled returns, if they have unpaid taxes, you've got to tackle this issue head on, but you can't go it alone. To contact the IRS on your own, to contact Sacramento on your own, it's not even an option. You can't do that.
Well, the unfortunate truth is that you're exactly right, Brian. The minute you call the IRS on your own behalf, it takes them about 30 seconds to know that you don't know, and they will, and they will. Unfortunately, they will many times exploit that and take advantage by not. They're not your advisors, so their mission is to collect the tax. The revenue officers, the ACS, which is automated collections at the service centers, mission is to collect the tax. The mission is not to advise you that the 10-year statute for collection is going to be up next month. Is not to advise you that they can put you in currently non-collectible status, what we call CNC status.
And what does that mean?
Well, let's say that you're unemployed or underemployed,
And so many people are.
and you owe a substantial amount of tax. It doesn't matter what substantial is. So for some people it's 10,000, for some people it's 50, and for some people it's 500,000. But the IRS, there's no debtor's prison. So the IRS is going to allow you a roof over your head. They're going to allow you food and clothing, medical insurance. They're actually going to allow you a car to drive, gas and maintenance for the car, out-of-pocket medical expenses, and the like. By the way, they're also going to allow you current year's taxes. So you add all those things up. If you're making less than $5,000 a month or so, you're going to be put in CNC status, currently non-collectible status. Now, what does that mean to you? Well, it means the IRS is not going to garnish your pay, not going to garnish your levy your bank account. So you don't need to be in fear of opening a checking account. Many of my clients don't have checking accounts and haven't had them for years because they're in fear of the IRS levying the few bucks that they get from unemployment, a few bucks they get from disability, which, by the way, they can't levy,
right.
Or from Social Security. And there are limitations to what the IRS can actually get from you. And by going through this process and having us get you put in currently non-collectible status, the IRS basically will leave you alone for a year or 2 or 3, depending on your circumstance.
Peter, how easy is it for your team at the Tax Resolution Institute to eliminate a wage garnishment? And as you indicated earlier, that's oftentimes the reason that people come into contact with you. They get this notice, they go, oh my goodness, they're docking my pay, they're garnishing my paycheck. When folks contact the Tax Resolution Institute, that's really kind of the first order of business sometimes, is to eliminate that garnishment. And is that a pretty easy thing for you to do, pretty expeditious thing to have done?
Well, if the taxpayer is cooperative and gets us the information that we need quickly, we can probably get a wage garnishment or bank levy. In fact, we can get the money put back in your bank account if they've levied it already within 24 to 48 hours. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but that is what I like to call the luck of the draw. Maybe you have a revenue officer that's more aggressive than another revenue officer, or a person at ACS, Automated Collections, that wants to be non-cooperative. But we are 100% successful in getting wage garnishments removed if their hand calls for it. You know, if they're making $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year and ignoring the IRS, well, that's a different conversation.
I watch a lot of cable television, and in the middle of the night, it seems that in recent years, saw a lot of commercials for a lot of different services, encouraging you to make contact with them if you had a tax issue. I have in my hand, as Karnak used to say, or Ed McMahon used to say to Karnak, I have in my hand the textbook on tax resolution. And Peter, Stephan, you authored it. I'm not kidding. It's really a textbook right here on tax resolution. Peter, thank you, and thanks to your team. And I encourage people to check out the website and make contact and know where you stand and resolve these issues. It's no way to live. In fear is no way to live. In fear of the IRS, in fear of California Franchise Tax Board, that's no way to live your life.
Well, thanks, Brian.
Thanks very much, Peter. Appreciate it.